Welcome to Transcendence Talks podcast with your host, licensed professional counselor, Kristy Crabtree. Join us as we build the bridge between psychology and spirituality and discuss psychology for the soul.
Hey everybody, welcome to Transcendence Talks podcast. Today I am here with a new friend, Dr. Nick Howland, and him and I actually met on the new TV show that we just filmed, Writer's Island. Welcome.
Hey, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Excited to have you. So your story just completely intrigued me. I think like one of the first things that you ever said to me is that you were excommunicated from the Mormon church, not once, but twice.
2 times. It's a special club, I think.
It's a special club. I don't know that many people belong to that club.
No, God. In fact, the list of people who've not been excommunicated is more shocking at times.
So, I love talking with people just about their spiritual journey and about where they've come from and how they've arrived to where they are. And for the TV show Writer's Island, we were paired as accountability partners. Mm-hmm. And at first I was like, okay, interesting. But when we started talking about ayahuasca and your spiritual journey, everything just became clear as to why we were supposed to be paired up and get to know each other before the island.
Yeah. We had a couple of Marco Polo talks and I was like, oh, this is definitely my accountability partner. I love this girl. And we connected on a lot of different things, and we've had some similar experiences and spiritual guidance in our life.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love just to dive in and have you tell our listeners a little bit about your story. I mean, I guess starting, just with your beliefs. And from what I understand, I mean, the church was everything, right? You were a devout member.
Yeah, I was pretty, typical white male kid from Salt Lake City, Utah. I grew up in the LDS Church, was born into it. My parents had 6 kids. There was a girl at each end, and I was the oldest of 4 boys. And we were just in this little suburb south of Salt Lake, and that was our bubble. Like everybody I knew was LDS. Like, it was kind of like if you had a friend who wasn't LDS, that was your token like non-LDS friend. But I was very devout. Like I was all in on it. I believed everything that was presented to me. I was a normal kid where you wouldn't want to go to church at times, but
sure.
Like there was never a question to me of this true, is this not true, is this what I believe or not? And I remember when so when you're 19, they've changed this now to 18, but when you're 19 as a young man, you're supposed to serve a church mission for 2 years. And they tell you like it's your decision, but it's expected of the young men. Mm-hmm. The young women can go, but they go later. And when I was growing up, it was men at 19 and women at 21. And it was kind of yes, it's if you want to, but the women were at 21 because the idea was if you wanted to, you had time to get married, because the whole theology is that, men and women are here to get married, have babies, multiply and replenish the earth, and create families and go back to live with God and live with your family forever, which is a beautiful theology. Mm-hmm. So I remember though, when I turned 19, I really wanted to go to medical school. I really wanted to become a doctor. And I knew that 2 years away was going to make that path longer. It wasn't necessarily harder. It was just longer. It was a long path. And I was like, 2 more years is going to be a lot. And I remember trudging up to my mom's room to tell her that I had made this decision to not go on a mission. And I mean, I wrestled with it because, if you don't go on a mission, you, especially in this bubble of everybody being Mormon in Utah, the assumption is not that you made that choice. The assumption is that you must not be worthy. Mm-hmm. Because to be able to go, you have to meet these requirements of being worthy. You can't be having sex before marriage. You can't be drinking or using drugs. And you have to meet these requirements. And for a lot of people who didn't go, it was because they weren't worthy to go. And so if you are just normally made this choice, and again, it's just not for me, that would not be the social gossip or what was thought of you. And I knew that going up to my mom's room. And I also knew that she was a single mom. My parents got divorced when I was 16. And I knew that this would be essentially social suicide for her as well. Here she is, single mom, raising 6 kids, and the oldest son decides not to go on a mission. Oh my God, what has she done wrong? And so I remember, and all of that like weighed on me at 19. I was thinking about all of those things as I walked into her room. And I sat down and I just said, Mom, made this really hard choice. And I went through my whole spiel. I want to go to medical school and it's too much time. And I laid it all out there for her. And I just waited for her to cry or beg or drop the hammer or something. And she just looks at me and she goes, I love you, honey. That's your choice.
Wow.
And I went downstairs and I get to my room and I'm just like, what the fuck? Oh, can I say fuck on this podcast?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
It's okay.
And it was either the best, like most brilliant form of reverse psychology, or she meant every word. And I think she meant every word. And that was a big moment in my life, though, where I did something that I often did in that stage of my life. And I turned to prayer. And I got on my knees and I said, okay, God, if this is what I'm supposed to do, you better friggin' make it real clear. And it became very, very clear to me that that was what I needed to do. And so I chose to go and I served. I served a 2-year mission to Russia and loved it. Had some incredible experiences, things that I consider miraculous.
I mean, you spoke some pretty good Russian in the taxi in Miami on the way to the airport.
That's right. We
I'll
had
never
a
forget
Russian
it.
guy there. One of our camera crews, Anton, was from Kiev, Ukraine, and he and I spoke Russian with each other.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
And I served. I came home, and when you finish a mission, you know, they tell you, all right, you've done your duty. Go get married. That's your next task. And I remember thinking, oh, I am not getting married. Not a chance. And a year later, I was married. In that relationship, though, when I came home from my mission, I started dating a girl who's now the mother of my kids, and we decided to test drive the relationship. We were having sex before marriage. And at one point, she was like, okay, let's take this to the next step. Let's get married. And I was like, whoa. I don't think I'm ready for that. She went home to Alaska. I stayed here in Utah, and we agreed, let's, kind of do our own thing this summer. And when she was going to come back for school, we would decide what we were going to do. And when she came back, I had fully anticipated that I would just say, hey, like, go do your thing. I'm going to do my thing. Let's be friends. I'm not ready to get married. And the second she walked off that plane, I just thought, this is it. And it was the same feeling as I had on my knees praying about whether I should go on a mission. And I had all these responses to prayer in my life. And when we decided, okay, let's get married, I knew that I had to go repent for, these sins, this horrible sin of having sex before you were married. And when I went in, it's a hard process. You sit in a room with what's called the High Council. That's 12 men, as well as the stake president, who's kind of the leader of he's like a high bishop. You've got the bishop over the wards, and then you have the stake president who's over several wards. And so he's got 2 counselors. So there are 15 men in this room, and half of the room argues for you, and half of the room argues against you. And for an hour, you're grilled on what you did, what your sins were, and why, and all of these things. And questions come up that are difficult to answer and hard to answer. And at the end of the experience, the stake president and his 2 counselors say, great, thank you for coming and sharing with us. We're going to go in this room now. We're going to talk to God, and we're going to see what he wants to do. And so you wait, and they come back in the room and they say, yep, we've talked to God, and the decision is to excommunicate you. And that happened twice in my life. After that first time, what's funny is the first experience, I was all in still. Like the excommunication was the worst thing that could happen to me. And the only thing I wanted to do was get back. How do I get back? And I raced to this bookstore called Deseret Book. It's an LDS Church owned bookstore, and there's got to be a book on this somewhere. There's got to be somebody who's gone through this and knows how to get back, and I can read all about what I've got to do. And there was nothing. And my immediate reaction was, oh my gosh, this is why this is happening. This is what God wants me to do. I'm supposed to write a book on this. Mm-hmm. And so I went through all these steps. My wife and I got married. I eventually got rebaptized into the church. And right after our daughter was born, I was given back all of my temple covenants and promises, and we got sealed together as a family in the temple. And that really is, I think, not what I struggled with, but what I spent a lot of time when we were on the island trying to help people understand. It's important to understand the severity of excommunication and what it means, especially if you believe the religion.
Right.
Because it can be, it's one thing for somebody to say, oh yeah, I left this religion that I didn't really believe in anymore. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, when you're excommunicated from a religion that you believe in, here's what I believed. I believed that we were sent here by God and that the whole plan is to get a body, exercise free agency, and then as we're here on earth, we make these progressive promises to God in order to get back to Him and live with our family. And as you make these promises with God, the first one is baptism. God makes promises back to you, covenants. And, with baptism, I promise to always remember Him and try to do the right thing. And He promises that the Holy Ghost will always be with me to help me do the right thing.
Yeah.
And then when I get sealed to my family, the difference between a Mormon wedding and a civil wedding is, in a civil wedding, they say, till death do you depart. In a Mormon wedding, it's for time and all eternity. And so you make these promises. I will be faithful to my family, and I will live the law of chastity, and I will do these things. The promise from God is you will be with your family forever.
Yeah.
And when you're excommunicated, every one of those promises are taken away. And so it's not just hey, like you're out of the church. Mm-hmm. It is a true severing of your soul from your family.
Wow.
And so that promise that I had of being tied to my children and to my wife forever was gone.
So how does that land? I mean, in that moment, right, when you're told, okay, God's made a decision and this is what it is. I mean, walk me through, what was that like in your body? What was that experience like with your family?
The first one, it was because I believed. All I wanted to do was get back. All I wanted to do was go through the repentance process, heal those wounds, and get back. The second time it happened, so the second time, my wife and I were married for almost 10 years. And around year 7 or 8, we went through a separation, and I went through this whole process again and got excommunicated again. And when it happened the second time, it felt like a true abandonment. It felt like I had been abandoned by God and everybody around me. And I write about this in the book, but there's this picture that the prodigal son returns, and it's this beautiful painting by Rembrandt, and it just depicts the story of the prodigal son. And the father is standing there, and his son, who's squandered his inheritance, is on his knees, and his father forgives him. And when Rembrandt painted that painting, he actually crushed up bits of glass in the paint that he used for the father's face, so that when the light hits the painting, it would reflect more on the father's face, and this to represent this never-ending act of forgiveness that the father would give unto this son of his. And the second time it happened, and the reason I tell you about the painting is because I felt like that painting was a lie.
Mm.
I felt like I had been told this story that no matter what I did, no matter what mistake I made, if I came back, there would always be somebody there to say, it's okay. Like, you're okay. And so when it happened the second time, I felt like I had come back and nobody was there. And so for a long time, I went pretty dark and I abandoned any kind of belief in a higher power. Didn't realize how much those two experiences affected my self-worth until I started writing this book.
Wow.
And because it would be 7 years after the second excommunication before I finally hit kind of a rock bottom moment where I was just, my life looked great on the outside. I had finished residency as a plastic surgeon. I'd moved back to Utah. My practice was successful, but on the inside, like everything was off.
Yeah. I mean, let me ask you this, because how do you reconcile these two realities? One where you can pray and you could receive guidance, and another where God says you're not worthy of that guidance. Like in that time, did you pray? Did you try to talk to God? Did you receive? What is that like?
That's such a good question, Kristy, because that is the one thing that kind of fucks with you the most when you decide, okay, God's out. Don't believe in him, her, it, like God's out.
Yeah.
And the thing you miss the most, though, is spirituality. And now you have this disconnect between like prayers and things that I believed to be miracles. So how do I fully accept this new idea that God doesn't exist and reconcile that with all of these experiences that I knew were from some sort of higher power?
Mm-hmm.
And for the longest time, I didn't have an answer for that. And I was just kind of in this limbo phase. I had a patient once who asked me, sorry, should be on Do Not Disturb. I had a patient once who asked me if I pray before surgery. And this was early in my practice. And she was in the room. We were marking this patient. We were about to walk back to surgery. And the way she asked this question is I knew she was going to cancel surgery right then and there if my answer was not what she wanted it to be. But I also am extremely honest with all of my patients. And so I sat there for a moment and I thought about it and I looked at her and I said, you know what? I do. I pray before every single surgery. And it wasn't until she asked me that question that I realized it. So when I started training, when I started, to become a doctor and a surgeon, I was very much believed. And every time I scrubbed into a case to operate, the same little prayer would go through my head, which was like, hey, guide my hands, be here with me, help me do the right thing. Very much just a be with me and guide my hands prayer. And I went through all my experiences and all the things happened. And when that lady asked me that question, I realized, holy shit, I still do that. I still sit at a sink, wash my hands, and say those same things in my mind. And I have no idea who I'm praying to anymore.
Wow. Yeah.
But I still do it. And I was honest with her and I told her that I said, I don't know who or what I believe in anymore, but do I pray before surgery? I absolutely do. And then you fast forward to, a rock bottom moment for me. And it was a crossroads in life where I either went down one path, which I was not going to survive. That path was suicide and the easy way out. And the other path was I either figure out me and I either do some of this hard work on myself, or this other path is the only thing there is. And
yeah. So what does that look like the work for you?
A lot of things. I think a lot of times we get in this, we get in what I call the woo-woo space, and everybody says, you got to do the work. Do the work. I'm doing the work. And I all the time would go home and be like, what the hell is the work?
Yeah.
And it was so many things for me. And I think it's different tools for everybody. Therapy, 1,000% was big for me. Like seeing an actual therapist, and diving into some of my actual like patterns and beliefs and belief systems that were incorrect. I had a really good friend give me a journal that was designed for men, and that was huge for me. One of the earliest things that I did that was a massive change is I started taking care of my own health. I was 70 pounds heavier. I was drinking way too much, probably like borderline functional alcoholic. And I just took care of me. I spent several months just not dating anybody. You know, post-divorce, I had gone through this pattern of just like on to the next girlfriend, and the next one was lined up before the last one ended. Most of it was because I was just terrified to be alone.
Yeah.
So spending some actual time with me made a huge difference. Plant medicine was a massive part of my journey as well. And I know it's been for you.
Mm-hmm.
There was an ayahuasca experience that really changed everything for me and became the impetus for this.
I'd love to dig into that a little bit, because when you have this conceptualization of God that's boxed in a dogmatic or religious framework, I think going into something like a plant medicine ceremony takes the box and like adds dynamite, blows it open. And I'm just curious what that was like for you. Did that expand your conceptualization of, or your definition of like, what is God anyways?
Yeah, it's funny because, I had some experiences with plant medicine before ayahuasca, but I had never experienced Aya. And going into that weekend, I remember telling several of my friends that were going to be there, like, hey, if I see God or Jesus on this, I'm going to be pissed. Because I knew a lot of people will visualize God or Jesus or grandmother or something, and I just said, I got beef with those guys. I don't want to talk to either one of them. And so that's very much where my mind still was going into Aya. Like, I had done a lot of this healing. It had been months. I'd lost my weight. I was this new man. But I still had all of this trauma around spirituality and God and any higher power. And that first night of Aya, I kind of, fought it a little bit with my ego until I realized, like, okay, if I listen to this medicine, then good things will happen. And Aya is fun. It is not a group experience. I mean, there's a lot of people in a room experiencing it, but it is an individual thing. You take a tea and you're lying on a mat, closing your eyes, having your own internal experience. And that second night, I asked for two specific intentions. My first one was gratitude, and my second one was inner child. And I had picked those two things because those were things on doing the work that everybody said was important. And I just didn't get it. It's not like I didn't know gratitude. I couldn't understand why everybody's like, oh, like writing down your things you're grateful every day, that's so important. I just didn't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And the inner child, like I had heard so many people tell these beautiful stories, how they're like, yeah, I did this breathwork session or this hypnotherapy, and I met my inner child and I forgave my inner child, and it was the most beautiful thing in the world. And I had done so many things to meet this inner child, and nothing, like hypnotherapy, breathwork, drum sessions, plant medicine, nothing. I didn't think he existed. And so those were my two things. And immediately after taking the medicine, I just was overcome with gratitude. And I had this, I will get a voice that comes into my head, and this voice came into my head and it says, hey, you need to go pray. And I just immediately, I'm like, oh, fuck you. But I had realized from the night before, like, good things happen if I listen to this voice. And if I don't, I get sick. But didn't want to be sick. So I rolled over onto my knees, and it was probably the first time in 8 years I had been on my knees in prayer. And I prayed all over the place that night. I prayed there on my mat. I went outside under the stars and the moon. I went up, by the altar where the shaman is pouring the tea. And each time I would get this really cool lesson in gratitude. And after all of those prayers, I finally went back to my little nest and I sat down. And I'm like, okay, that was awesome. Let's let's do this inner child stuff. I'm so ready. And nothing came to me. And I started to get angry. And I went back up to the altar and I'm like kneeling down. I'm like, this is bullshit. Like you have given me all these cool lessons in gratitude. Thanks. Amazing. But I have done so much to try and figure out this inner child. And I can't find it. It's not fair. And I went back to my little nest and I finally got to a place where I was like, you know what? It's okay. I will continue trying. I've had a beautiful experience this weekend. I've learned some incredible lessons in gratitude. It's okay. And the second I thought that, this voice comes back. And this voice this time sounded like a little chastising this time. And it just says, excuse me, I have been showing you all night long the best example of your inner child that I could possibly show you.
Wow.
You have been praying all night long. And you were a devout kid, and somewhere you lost that. I need you to understand that prayer is nothing more than an expression of gratitude. And the second that I heard and felt that, my mind went through it was like a slideshow of memories. And it was all me as a kid praying. And it was all of those experiences that I had had. The one with my mom going on a mission, and ones before that. I remember praying that my parents would not get divorced, or like all of these times that I had been on my knees. And I got to finally meet my inner child that night. And I left there with this commitment to pray every single day. And what's funny is it didn't change. I don't want to say it's funny. I think it's the most beautiful thing about the story is it didn't change the struggles that I had with God and Jesus. But it reframed the story that I had told myself about prayer and about belief in a higher power. And is that you don't need to believe in this idea of God or Jesus that everybody has told you need to believe in order to pray and to be grateful and to have connection to a higher power. It's there regardless.
Right. Absolutely.
And that was, honestly, that was the impetus for the entire book.
And I love the title of your book, The Atheist Prayer. It's really, really beautiful. Because it sounds like some kind of an oxymoron, but really it isn't. I mean, and how would you define God today?
My definition of God is still evolving.
Yeah.
But I do believe that God is within all of us and that we all are God and that God is all of us. And so, my buddy, I called a friend of mine after that whole prayer experience with the patient. And I was like, dude, who am I praying to? What is happening? And he's like, dude, I believe, he's like, you gotta decide what you believe. He's like, but for me, I believe I'm just talking to the highest version of myself when I pray. And that stuck with me for a little while, and I love that. But now I do absolutely believe in a higher power. And whether it's that highest version of me, or whether it's, God or Buddha or Jesus, but to me, it doesn't make a difference what you call it. I think that higher power is available to all of us, and I think is within all of us.
Absolutely. I believe that too. My husband grew up LDS and I didn't. And I watched him go through a lot of the processing of the aftermath of what it looks like to leave the church. And that, I want to go back to something you said earlier, because what I've witnessed just as somebody who loves him and had to watch him go through this and come to his own conclusions as well, what he had to wrestle with the longest in reconceptualizing what God meant to him was this feeling of worthiness. And I'm just kind of curious, did this single experience reconcile that for you? Or has this been a journey of coming back to what it means to be worthy in your own eyes or God's eyes for you?
That experience was a very small part of this journey of rediscovering my own self-worth. And then all the tools that we talked about, every one of those things was something that helped me rediscover a love for me. and my own self-worth. Like I did the 75 hard program to help lose my weight initially. And I remember going to bed for the first night, and it was the first night in probably 6 years I hadn't had a glass of whiskey. And I was like, oh shit, I could go into DTs tomorrow. This might get real. And when I didn't, I was very excited. I was not an alcoholic. But that program, the before and afters that people show of their physical transformation is great. That's why a lot of people jump into it. The real benefit, at least for me, of that program was for 75 days, I kept little promises to me. And the power that has to change your mind and to help you believe that you're worth more than you think you are is tremendous. Like I'll share one more story. So the third night that I started 75 hard, I flew to Turkey. And I flew to Turkey with a friend of mine. I was going for a work conference, and I knew the travel day was going to be tough. I'm like, oh, I got to get 2 workouts in. I got to do all this stuff. And one of these workouts has to be outside. And one of our flights had been delayed. And so we didn't get to this little small city in Turkey until about 1 a.m. And I look at this friend and I'm like, hey, I haven't done my outside workout. And she's like, dude, you've been walking around airports all day long. I think you're good.
Yeah.
Haven't been outside. And so I just tell her, you go ahead, go to bed. I'll be going to bed later. I'm going to go get a quick workout in. So I threw some clothes on, and the hotel was at the top of this hill. And so I started jogging down this hill, and all of a sudden, like, I realized I'd see like this huddled group of men smoking in an alley. And I'm like, I am in a foreign country. It's almost 2 a.m. This is not smart. And so that hill to the hotel, I just started doing these jogs up and down this hill, up and down this hill. And I got tired and I went up to where the entrance to this room was. And I look at my watch and I still had 15 minutes. And I'm like, ugh. So I just said, okay, here's what I'll do. I'm going to just do some calisthenics, do 3 sets of that, jumping jacks and push-ups and sit-ups, and then we'll be good. And so I do 1 set, and I was on this little courtyard, and there was this view of the city down below. And so I did 1 set, and I went and I looked at this view, and the moon was shining. You could see the entire city just lit up. And I was like, God, this is gorgeous. And I go back, I do my 2nd set, and I go back and I look at the view, and I do the 3rd set, and I go back, and 3rd time I'm just looking at this view, and I just start sobbing, and this feeling came over me, and it was a feeling that I had not felt in a long time, and it was pride. I was proud of me, and I was 3 days in. I could have been like, oh, fuck this, we'll start when I get back from Turkey.
Right. Right.
But I had promised myself, and it was a moment when I was like, you keep promises to yourself. You keep promises to you because you do care about you and you do love you. And that was one of the biggest moments for me in this journey.
That's so beautiful. And that touches on something that I believe so deeply, which is the only separation that we have from ourselves and God is a separation that we perceive. And it's literally the boxes that we put ourselves in, whatever you want to call those boxes, shame or self-doubt or trauma or fear. But I think, if we literally are all fractals of God, which I believe that we are, then our bodies are temples, to be cared for as what houses that essence of God, that spark. And there is something to be said. I know in my healing process too, it was like these promises to myself, this living in integrity. I went through a period where I was like, I just need to kind of get really clear. And I want to know me at the core of who I am. And it was like, I knew I needed to take sugar out of my diet, just detox sugar. I knew no more alcohol. I didn't even feel like I had an issue with it, but I just wanted to be so clear. It felt like I needed to make space to hear God. And, there really is something to that when you know that you're making promises and keeping promises to yourself and living in this space of deep integrity, that there's an inner unity that happens that I think creates that unity or space for that unity between you and the divine too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then I got to go relive all that on the island for a week.
So what was that like? I mean, just kind of reliving these stories. I mean, you were busy on the island. Like every time I'm like, oh, what's Nick doing? And I looked over. I didn't even go talk to you because I'm like, I'm not going to disrupt that process. You were like so focused. And even the breaks you took in the pool, like you had your laptop at the pool during your breaks.
Yeah. You know, I came in with this plan where I was excited to just get this out, like dump all of this. The first 3 days I was writing all the shit, like all the hard stuff. I was writing, you know, my parents' divorce, and I was writing my excommunications and, you know, car accidents and all of these things that at one point I felt had happened to me. And I've gotten to a place where I'm very grateful for everything because I feel like it's all happened for me. But to write it appropriately, I had to go put myself back in victim mode so I could at least express how I was feeling as I went through it. And so those first few days, like I struggled. I was exhausted by the end of the day, emotionally worn out. And Thursday morning on that island, I had this really incredible experience. We did our blessing of the body in the morning. And at this point, I've come to know, you know, all 14 of you women much, much closer. And Kira's doing this blessing of the body, and she's talking about God and she's talking about Jesus. And I know that almost everybody on that island, all of the authors had some sort of, everybody's had their own trauma. All of you had gone through some really hard stuff, like a lot of sexual abuse, physical abuse. One gal lost a teenage son to a drug, to fentanyl. And I'm in this blessing of the body and I'm realizing, oh my God, all of these women found their peace through God and Jesus. And I have always felt like God and Jesus were the source of my trauma. And so I'm now like bawling in this blessing of the bodies. I don't know what to do with this. And I talked to Kira about it later, and in our one-on-one session, I just said, hey, this is what I felt this morning. And I said, I need you to understand, I'm past that though. Like I'm not at a point where I feel anger or resentment towards God or Jesus. I just feel like I found me from within, and I found this belief in a higher power from within. And you can tell me it's God or Jesus or Buddha or Mother Earth. It doesn't matter, but it was from within. And Kira did such a beautiful job of just saying, Nicholas, like nobody needs you to come to this island and believe in their version of God or Jesus. Like you tell your story, and your story will resonate with whoever it resonates with, but it's your story. And then the last night, Friday night, Jeremy was doing breathwork, and
Freaking Jeremy.
So that day, what you have to understand, Kira had told me, she's like, this is the atheist's prayer. I feel like you need a prayer at the end of this book. And I'm like, oh, that's brilliant. Like I need a prayer at the end of this book. So we go into this breathwork session, and I'm like, I'm gonna come up with this prayer. And everybody's on their backs, and we're all getting started. It was like this Aya experience again. This voice comes in my head and says, hey, you need to get on your knees and you need to pray. And I'm like, oh, no.
Cameras rolling. We're on a TV show.
Yeah, nobody's on drugs here. Like,
no.
This is not Aya. I'm not going to roll over on my knees during this experience. And the second I thought that, Jeremy in his voice just goes, if you'd like to reposition yourselves, feel free to do so right now. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So I rolled over onto my knees, and I thought about the atheist prayer and what this prayer would be. And I had this moment where I realized my story has always been that God and Jesus abandoned me. And in that breathwork session, the beautiful realization I had was that I was never abandoned. Like I was where I was supposed to be the whole time. And this was my path and where I'm supposed to be the whole time. And when that came to me, I'm like, do you remember the Footsteps poem?
Oh yeah.
I'm like, don't you footsteps me here, God. Like, God, if you tell me that's where I carried you, I'm going to be pissed. But it was just a really beautiful moment of gratitude for like, no, nobody was abandoned. Like, this is what you needed to go through. This is what you needed to experience. And this is because you couldn't have been this version of you without all of those things.
So beautiful. So beautiful. Life is just this gorgeous tapestry where in hindsight, it's so clear. It is so clear that literally every trauma, every wound, every perception of abandonment, whatever it is that womb, like that portal that births us into exactly who we are. But my God, you can't see it in the moment. It is so incredibly painful, but wow. And so now your wife is getting ready after your experience to join season 2 of this show.
My Haley. I love talking about nobody more than her. And she, while I was out there, you know, she was being just amazing and supportive. What's funny is a lot of you guys go out this island, and I think you guys have these relationships with your spouse where you probably talk quite a bit throughout the day. And so when you get out the island, they're like, okay, do your thing, focus on your book.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in surgery most of the time, most days. And so Haley and I rarely talk. And so this island was like a chance for us to actually have some conversations throughout the day. And so while I'm there, I'm talking with her and in between writing. And she was just like, baby, I love that you're doing this. You need to do your thing. Like, I'm not going to interrupt what you're doing, but I'm really feeling like something like this could be what I need for me. And I said, absolutely. I think it would. Like, let's introduce you to Kira. Let's have you meet her and see what you think. And when I came home, she had a phone call with Kira, and it was an immediate, like, yep, I'm in.
Wow. What are your hopes for her as she gets ready to embark on this in September?
So I hope that I hope that it's as healing for her as it was for me. Haley has an incredible story that is hers, and I will let her share it. And I think it's a story that will resonate very deeply with women. And I think it has an incredible capacity to change lives.
I'm so excited to get to know her better.
You will love her. She's an absolute doll.
Yeah, I think, going into the island experience, it's like it transforms you in ways that you probably can't begin to like predict, or words just always seem to fail when I try to explain to people what we lived that week. But you did a really beautiful job today of expressing it. And I'm just so grateful that we got that time together in that portal of whatever that was. I mean, God is just so present on that island. And I don't think any of us 15 authors who walked onto the island that day left the same person.
Not at all. Listen, I love this space. I love this space of self-healing and self-love and all of that. But I'm also a Western trained physician. And so I think that comes with a healthy dose of skepticism and cynicism. For me, that's always ever present. I'm not somebody who, like, if I walk into a room, I'm like, oh, the energy's off, or like I can tell, like, that's just not at the forefront for me. But the second I walked on that island, I was just hit with this overwhelming feeling of, this is a special place. This is a very special place. And that feeling never left the whole week.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be really exciting to see where this journey takes us all. And I know, for my husband, who's also going through a process, I remember there was one night over dinner where Mindy shared a prayer. And I was like, ooh, I like that. I'm going to borrow it. And her prayer was that our spouses are at home right now, and we are going through this process where we are being held in this cocoon of like transformation and change, and they're not. And so her prayer at dinner was that God would work on them too, so that when we come home, they can receive us as we are now and not as the people we were when we walked on that island. And I prayed that prayer over my family on the island. And it's so neat just to catch up with some of the other authors like you and to hear how that changed Haley, right? Like in your surrender, in your growth experience, she was like, oh, I think I need that too. And I know that happened for my husband as well, where despite whatever it was I was going through, we were living separate lives. It shifted something in him too, without me trying or doing or anything, but just in our becoming. It's like we're watching our loved ones around us shift. And that excites me too, because it's like knowing that 15 books birthed from that experience are going into the world is going to shift a lot of people.
Yeah.
So
I'm so glad you reminded me of that. I completely forgot about that. And I'm excited to tell Haley about that tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mindy was so insightful with that. And I was like, yeah, I think I need to pray that prayer too. And I'm so glad I did, because the things that shifted for me were very parallel in what shifted for my husband as a result. Energy seems to be kind of contagious, you know, and I know, right? If you're around grumpy people all day, you're probably going to be kind of grumpy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you're around people who are like in this space of expansion, you're like, if that's possible for them, I think that might be possible for me too. And it's like that 4-minute mile, right? So I'm excited to see what you guys do and create together. And I'm excited for your book, The Atheist Prayer, to come into the world, because I know, like, even as a group practice owner, we see a lot of people coming in who echo a lot of these sentiments that you're echoing, in finding their worth, in reconceptualizing their belief in God. And so your story is one that feels deeply, deeply important. And so I'm so grateful to have you on today to share it.
Thank you, Kristy. I really appreciate being on.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to share? How can our audience find you if they want to?
Oh man, I'm an open book. My life is on Dr. Nicholas Howland on Instagram. Just follow the adventures there.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kristy.
All right.